It's well known. It's a well-known issue that African Americans, black people in America, so-called, don't know their history, that they're cut off from the history of Africa, and even the history of everything that they did and everything that was done to them in America. That's why you have Black History Month, right? So this is something that everyone knows about. Everyone is aware of this issue. But the truth is that so-called white people don't know their history either. Their history in America or their history in Europe. Americans generally don't know history, which is incredibly useful when you consider the fact that history repeats itself. It's incredibly useful to keep the entire population in a state of amnesia, so that the whole country operates like the main character in that film Memento, you know? So you keep doing the same things that you've always done, and you never understand that you're actually doing the things that history has already judged to be crimes. You understand? You can do it as if there's no context, as if there's no history, as if there's no pattern. That's the whole point of approaching current events from an ahistorical perspective. You don't want anyone to see the pattern. You want to be able to do things that have already been condemned by history, but you want to keep doing them anyway, as if you don't know that they're contemptible. You don't know that they are condemned actions. Just like Donald Trump now invoking the Alien Enemies Act in reference to mass deportations and so on. Okay, this is the same act that put tens of thousands of Japanese Americans into internment camps in World War II, and for which the United States government eventually had to provide compensation and eventually had to even apologize for doing it. You see, it is something completely contemptible that you did, but you want to repeat it. So you forget your history. You forget history so you can repeat history without blame. Both so-called white people and so-called black people in America don't know their history. Both have been told lies about the past, about their respective pasts. And the only reason for that is for the purpose of maintaining the continuity of the contemptible reality of how that society operates. Amnesia and fictional histories serve as a preventative measure against change, against reform, against rehabilitation. America chooses to live like it's in the movie Groundhog Day. You know, you pretend that only today exists over and over and over again. And because of this forced amnesia, because of this deliberate suppression of historical awareness, the people in America don't even recognize when they're reliving their own past. They think that they're facing something new. They think that they're responding to some unprecedented crisis every time. If you have no recollection where the road leads that you're on, then you'll keep walking it again and again, never realizing that it has already led you into disaster after disaster, dozens of times before. And this is exactly the condition that the rulers in America want, that the elite of America want, not just for black people, not just for so-called white people, but for everyone. Because the most effective way to ensure that a crime continues is to make sure that it is never recognized as a crime. To make sure that every time you commit that crime, it feels like the first time. You know? So when Trump talks about invoking the Alien Enemies Act, most Americans don't hear the echoes of history from that. They don't hear the voices of the Japanese Americans who were dragged from their homes and put behind barbed wire for years and years. They don't remember that that country had to apologize for doing exactly what they're about to do again. The American mind resets every morning, and that's the perfect condition for those in power. Because if people really understood history, then they would recognize that nothing about the American system is accidental. Every aspect of it, from its racial hierarchies to its economic disparities to its unjust foreign policies, is simply the continuation of an old script, a script that has played out again and again, always leading to oppression, always leading to exploitation, always leading to war, always leading to misery. And this is why in America history isn't taught. Fiction is taught, legends are taught, myths are taught, but not history. Because real history would be dangerous. Real history would break the illusion and potentially break the cycle. So-called white people in America know a version of history. They know a story. They know a narrative that has been carefully crafted to shape how they see themselves, how they see their ancestors, how they see their nations and their place in the world, and how they see everyone else. And this ignorance, this deliberate miseducation that they have imposed upon their own people, allows the same crimes to continue. What most white people in America and Europe believe about their history is not history at all. It's mythology, designed to produce a specific kind of person. A person who does not feel guilty, a person who does not feel accountable, a person who does not feel responsible for ever changing anything because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're taught that their ancestors were pioneers, their ancestors were explorers and builders of civilization, that they've brought progress and democracy and enlightenment to the world. They hear about the Renaissance, they hear about the Industrial Revolution, they hear about the Age of Discovery, and so forth and so on. And not about enslavement, not about genocide, not about the theft, not about the destruction that their people are responsible for. They're not taught that their prosperity was built on unimaginable suffering. They're not taught that their systems of government, their financial empires, their very sense of national identity are all rooted in exploitation. They don't know about the crimes. They don't know the real legacy of their people. And so they don't change. They don't have to change because they don't even realize what they need to correct. You know, when we look at colonialism, for example, the history that's taught in Western schools is usually an abstraction. Colonization is framed as something that it just sort of happened a long time ago, you know, something that was maybe unfortunate, but it was inevitable, and ultimately it represented progress, and there were many beneficial things to come from it. Never mind the millions of Africans who died in the Congo Free State under King Leopold. Most white Americans have never heard of them. Never mind the Bengal famine of 1943 when millions of Indians starved to death due to British policies. They don't even know about it. The fact that the American police forces evolved from slave patrols, they don't know about that either. And they're not any more informed about the ongoing crimes, like the pillage of African resources today, the economic neocolonialism that keeps entire regions of the world impoverished, the exploitation of labor in the global South. These aren't relics of history. That's the present day reality of what your people are doing. But the story that that white people are told does not include those realities, or else it packages those realities deceitfully and dishonestly. They package them dishonestly and deceitfully in the past just like they do now. The irony is that when they're confronted with the truth, many of these people will react defensively. You know, I didn't do that. That was in the past. Why should I feel guilty? But this reaction in and of itself reveals how little they're really understanding. It's not about guilt. It's about responsibility. You know, if a person inherits a stolen house, they may not have stolen it themselves, but they still live in it. And if they refuse to acknowledge where that house came from or how it came into their possession, if they insist that that house is rightfully theirs because the crime happened a long time ago, well, then they're complicit because the theft is ongoing. The crime never really stopped. So when people don't know their history, they cannot recognize when history is repeating itself and when history is actually just a continuum into the present. This is why so-called white people in America can watch their government arm and support genocide in Gaza, bomb Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and so on, and actually believe when they say it's for the purpose of security. They don't see the colonial mindset at work. That's why they can see corporations, for example, Western corporations, strip mine Africa for resources and not connect that to the centuries of plunder that came before. This is why they can hear about mass incarceration, about police brutality and systemic racism in the United States, and not understand that these are not new problems. These are just new forms of an old system. These are new manifestations of the same system. And this is why they don't resist, why they don't challenge the structures that continue to exploit and continue to oppress, because they don't even recognize those systems as continuations of the age-old exploitation and oppression. The truth is, white people have been colonized too, not physically, not economically, but psychologically. They've been conditioned to believe in a history that never happened, a history where they were always the heroes, a history where they were never the villains, and where their victims were villains. And as long as they live inside that fiction, well, they'll continue to perpetuate the same crimes of their past, even without realizing it. which just means that we're not even talking about past crimes. We're talking about ongoing crimes from the past until today. Like I said, it's a continuum. If there's ever going to be any real change, if there's ever going to be any hope for justice, then so-called white people have to actually learn your history. Not the history that makes you feel proud and makes you feel good, that makes you feel comfortable, but real history, the history that makes you uncomfortable, the history that you've denied all this time. And only when white people know their real history, really know it, then maybe they can begin to take the first steps towards repairing the damage that that history caused. The damage that it caused to millions upon millions of people all around the world, including themselves. I mean, Americans, particularly so-called white Americans, you're all like the child of the BTK killer, trying to come to terms with the fact that you were raised by a monster who you always thought was a good and upright man. If Americans in general really understood their history, well, they would know that the United States government has only ever used fear as a weapon against them. And every war that America has ever been involved in was only justified by lies. And every act of domestic repression has only ever been framed as being necessary for the sake of security. They would know that the anti-immigration movements, the anti-Muslim ban and so forth, and all of their surveillance programs, it's not new. It's the same thing. It's just rebranded versions of old crimes. There's absolute continuity. And the only reason that you don't know that is because you have no actual understanding of your own history. Yes, if Americans truly understood their history, they would not be so easily manipulated. They would not be so easily controlled. They would not be so quick to repeat the wrongs of the past, or rather to continue the wrongs of the past. But that's exactly why history is hidden from them. I mean, it's trite but true. There is nothing more powerful than knowledge. There's nothing more dangerous to a corrupt system than a population that remembers. And that's why our mission must be to educate people and to awaken people and to reconnect people with the reality of their own history, the good and the bad.
Shalom, welcome to another video, and as always, before I get started, I want to give all praise, all honor, and all glory unto Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Kodesh, and next double honors to the head apostles / elder bishops of the great millstone who teach and who rule well. Peace, blessings, and safety to all you sincere Akim. Keep pushing, keep believing, and keep the faith, regardless of whether people hear or whether they forbear. Alright, so this is going to be a reaction to the clip that I put in the introduction of this video. And Salakia, alright, for it being so long. But, alright, the guy was cooking. Alright, he was speaking nothing but straight facts. So I said I gotta clip this and do a video on it because, alright, man, he was summing up things that are happening in the world, okay, and the way that the world is starting to view things excellently. Alright, essentially, you know, part of the Great Awakening, all right, is the Israelites recognizing who they are and also recognizing who Esau is, okay, and that covering cast, all right, that veil, okay, where everyone had pretty much subscribed to so-called white supremacy, believing that they were, you know, the pinnacle of morality, the pinnacle of humanity. All right, these things are fading away. Okay, the Lord is exposing them. All right, okay, exposing them for who they really are, and their history is being brought up, and they can't stand it. They're trying to hide it. Okay, because they know. All right, and we know, as always, we have people that are able to excellently bring things out in a carnal perspective, but we are able to bring things out from a spiritual perspective by lining it up with the scriptures. So what's happening is biblical. Okay, them being exposed is part of the prophecies. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and dive right into that topic. And Yahweh Rachazab, meaning Heavenly Father's will, it's edifying to the elect. All right, so I'm going to start off here in Isaiah chapter 25 and verse 7. It says, "And he will destroy in this mountain the face of the covering cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations." Okay, and a veil, once again, is a covering over their eyes. Okay, the whole world has subscribed to so-called white supremacy. Okay, it's been pushed out, all right, through, you know, Esau, Edom's false prophet, the Roman Catholic Church, okay, the painting over of the images, with the white Jesus, okay, the Roman iconoclasm, all right, which back in what's known as the Renaissance period, which that word Renaissance means rebirth. All right, what did the Edomites do? They went around the world, changing images of any notable and prominent figure in history to their images. Okay, they went around knocking the noses off of statues to try to hide, who these people really were. All right, so all this is coming out. Okay, who they actually are, which is Esau, Edom, the wicked. And even though people of the world don't connect it with the Bible in the way that we do, all right, they're starting to see, okay, hey man, these people, their works speak for themselves, that they are, that they're evil. Okay, Micah chapter 2 and verse 2. All right, it says, and they covet fields and take them by violence, and houses and take them away. So they oppress a man and his house, even a man and his heritage. Okay, so they go into lands, and as he said, they pillage African countries. They pillage countries in different parts of the world. All right, so they take the land, they take the people, they exploit the people. Okay, and they take their heritage. Okay, they'll go to a nation. All right, and then they'll paint over the images, of that nation's prominent figures, and say that those people came from them. Okay, hell, if we were to continue on in America for another 100 years, they would tell you that the Native Americans were Caucasian. Okay, the ancient Egyptians, all of a sudden they're Caucasian. All right, this is what they do. It says, continuing on, verse 3, therefore thus saith the Lord Yahweh Bashmiel Shai, behold, against this family do I devise an evil, from which ye shall not remove your necks, neither shall ye go haughtily, for this time is evil. And this time it's talking about is World War III, but essentially all the nations turning against Esau, Edom. Okay, and nuclear fire will be the end of that. And this is the beginning stages of it. They're being called out on their wickedness. All right, verse 4, in that day shall one take up a parable against you, and lament with a doleful lamentation, and say, we be utterly spoiled. He hath changed the portion of my people. How hath he removed it from me? Turning away, he hath divided our fields. That's what people are doing. They're taking up a lamentation against them. Okay, they're complaining about the ways of Esau. All right, they're recognizing that he's the wicked. Okay, this is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 4. It says, behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. All right, so Esau's soul is not upright. All right, but the just, which is the elect, will move by faith. It says, yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. Okay, so he's very proud. All right, transgresseth by wine, meaning that he pushes out false doctrine, he pushes out lies, and has made the nations drunk. All right, neither keepeth at home, he's always in war somewhere. Okay, Psalms 140 and 2 says that. Constantly are they gathered together for war, constantly in other nations' business. Okay, so-called spreading democracy, when really all they're doing is just pillaging the natural resources of that country. And I've said this many times before, that a lot of these countries over in Africa are poor because the West pillages them. Okay, they go and destroy them, steal their natural resources, raise up coups against the established government. Okay, arm them, fund them. They cause civil war so they can come in, they can destabilize the country, and then come in there and pillage the resources. Okay, so he gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. All right, and he also, has all the different nations here in America and throughout the Western countries pretty much servants to him, but specifically here in America. It says, verse 6, shall not all these take up a parable against him? That's what's happening now. And a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. All right, woe to him that, destruction unto him that has gotten rich and wealthy through fraud. All right, through pillaging, through lies, through robbery. All right, and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. And you go into the Hebrew word, that word is going into debt. Okay, continuing on, it says, shall not they rise up that shall bite thee, and shall vex thee? Awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee, because of men's blood, and for the violence of the land, and of the city, and of all that dwell therein. Okay, so the nations are getting ready to rise up and spoil Esau. It says, woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house. All right, so he desires things that don't belong to him, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. So He's got attained this level of comfort and luxury here in America, Babylon the Great, through robbery. Okay, they would have you to believe that they just worked hard, they were innovators and all this. No, 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 no. That's not how it went down. Okay, and they want to hide that history. They obtained their riches and wealth through free labor, through murder, through robbery. Okay, and the nations are starting to call that to mind. They're calling them out for it. Okay, verse 10. It says, "Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establish a city by iniquity." Okay, so once again, that's how they established their riches and wealth, through bloodshed and iniquity. Okay, and the nations are calling them out for that. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to remove different things out of the history books to try to hide it. But you can't hide it, man. Okay, the world knows, the world sees. Sirach 41:7. All right, it says, "The children will complain of an ungodly father, because they shall be reproached for his sake." All right, and that's what's happening right now. Okay, you have Edomites that are trying to say that they're victims because people are bringing out the history, bringing out the facts, and that's what's happening. Okay, they're complaining because they're being reproached for their evil, wicked forefathers, which they still are. They're still the exact same. They're no different. Okay, because it literally is them. You come back every 3 or 4 generations, which we go into reincarnation all the time. But okay, yeah, man. Okay, they're being reproached. Okay, they're being accosted. People are calling them out, and they want to play the victim. All right, but as the guy said in the video, you're still benefiting off of the atrocities of your forefathers, so the crime is still continuous. Okay, Obadiah 1:6. All right, it says, "How are the things of Esau searched out? How are his hidden things sought up?" Okay, how is all this coming to the light? It's because Yahweh Bashem Yahshai is bringing it to the light. Okay, the Lord said, "But I have made Esau bare. I had uncovered his secret places, and he shall not be able to hide himself." Okay, the Lord is revealing him through the spirit of his mouth. All right, it says, "His seed is spoiled, and his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not." That's how we know who Esau is, through his actions. Because that's what he does. He robs, he steals, he kills. All right, he spoils. Okay, anywhere that he goes, that's his MO. All right, so he has exposed himself through his actions, because once again, this was a mystery. All right, it was a veil over all the nations of who the wicked was. They thought that Esau was the hero of the story, because that's the way he's portrayed himself. But people are taking a real look and examining history and realizing, no, Esau's been the villain the whole time. Okay, and we are able to go into the prophecies and show you his characteristics and say, this is the wicked. These are the Edomites right here. Okay, so he's not able to hide himself anymore. All right, and his actions verify that. Okay, because once again, his seed is spoiled. These Edomites are oppressing their own people now, are his brethren and his neighbors, and he is not. Okay, starting out with these elites, man. Okay, we know exactly who the Edomites are now through their actions. The Lord has revealed it as prophesied. All right, and we'll close out with this, 2 Thessalonians 2:7. "For the mystery of iniquity does already work." The Roman Empire, that's Esau Edom's kingdom. Okay, the so-called white man. Okay, the Greek and the Roman Empire. He really had two. All right, the mystery of iniquity does already work, because Job 9:24. All right, it says, "The earth is given into the hands of the wicked." Okay, he painteth over the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So Job said the earth was given to the hands of the wicked, but who is the wicked? Okay, it finished the scripture out with a question. Well, now we know. It's not a mystery anymore. Okay, it says, "Only he who now letteth will let, until he be taken out of the way." So the Lord has allowed these Edomites to rule in wickedness for a period of time, but now that time is coming to an end, and they're getting ready to be taken out of the way. Okay, and how is that going to happen? It tells you right here in the next verse. "And then shall that wicked, which is Esau Edom, the so-called white man, be revealed." And I must say that it's not all so-called white people were Edomites. Okay, just got to say that. All right, some of them are Jake. All right, so we don't judge based off how they look. We gauge their spirit. All right, but continuing on. "And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, because when he returns, according to Isaiah 63, he's coming back to make war with Esau." Okay, so that's pretty much it for the video. Yahweh Righteous Hour edifying. Okay, the world is waking up to the truth. All right, and with that being said, I'm gonna close out. Alright, all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakodash. And until next time, Shalom, and abide b'ball.